Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. In this video, we're going to be looking at the entire Underworld series, but mostly looking at the fifth and final Underworld film, Blood Wars from 2016. This is widely considered the worst of the Underworld films, and I want to take a closer look at why. In my opinion, there was some mistakes made with the writing that led to this point, but also some unfortunate things outside the control of the creators. The real question is it really as bad as people say? Real quick, before we get into the movie, this video is sponsored by Mando. They have a range of amazing products to help you smell better. I got the Clover Woods deodorant stick, the Mount Fuji 4-in-1 bar, the bourbon leather body wash, and some free deodorant wipes. My favorite scents are definitely the Clover Woods and the bourbon leather. It's not too strong but has a unique smell. Something I really like about Mando is that their products are gentle on skin. I have to be really careful because my skin gets irritated by different products really easily. Mando was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. Mando is a whole body deodorant, so you can use it where you would normally use deodorant, but also down below and anywhere else you want to prevent odor, even your feet. Mando is clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. 12 hours after a shower, it still keeps working. Might be handy during some of those camping situations. I know I'm going to use it this weekend because I'm going to a 2-day music festival. Choose from 4 different scents that are all unique: bourbon leather, Clover Woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. They also have unscented if that's what you're into. Unlike certain traditional deodorants that try to mask odor with a fragrance, Mando is formulated and powered by a mandelic acid to stop odor before it starts. Mando reduces odor all day and continues working for 72 hours. Mando is skin safe, baking soda free, cruelty free, vegan, pH optimized to use anywhere on your body, and paraben free. They also have aluminum free products available, which I'm a big fan of. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, or an acidified cleansing bar, and 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash or deodorant wipes. Plus they have free shipping, which is always a bonus. To make the deal even better, I have a discount code to help you start smelling better from head to toe. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with my exclusive code. That all adds up to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code Kogan at Mando.com. Thanks to Mando for sponsoring the video. Let's start with a quick review of the story leading up to Blood Wars in order to understand it better. I won't be going over every single detail, just a general overview. The first film from 2003 follows a vampire assassin known as a death dealer. Her name is Celine, and she finds out that Victor, the person that turned her and she thought was like a father to her, actually killed her family, not Lycans like she had been led to believe. During the film, she meets Michael, a descendant of Alexander Corvinus, the original immortal. Michael ends up in the crosshairs of Lucian, who is trying to create the first hybrid. This is really the main story that connects all the films. For centuries, vampires and Lycans have been at war. The hybrid is the next step, a merging of the bloodlines. In the prequel Rise of the Lycans, Lucian and Victor's daughter Sonia conceived the first hybrid child, but it's killed along with the mother Sonia before it can be born. Victor seen this merging of the bloodlines as an abomination, so much so, he sentenced his own daughter to death. Lucian and the other Lycans who are slaves to the vampires rise up and defeat them, kicking them out of their own castle. Lucian knew this wouldn't last though, so he made a deal with the vampire Craven. They would fake Lucian's death. Craven would get the glory for killing Lucian, and Lucian would be able to go into hiding without any worry of being hunted. This would allow the Lycans to build their numbers and make a plan. Centuries later, Lucian's plan is to create another hybrid using a descendant of Alexander Corvinus. For some reason, you have to be a descendant of the original immortal in order to become a hybrid. Normally, if a vampire bites a Lycan or vice versa, they will die because the viruses don't mix. But the Corvinus family has unique DNA that allows their body to adapt to the viruses and mold them. The one exception to this rule is that you can be born a hybrid, like Lucian and Sonia's child. So you can be born a hybrid, but not turned into one after the fact unless you are a descendant of Alexander Corvinus. Lucian thinks by merging the bloodlines it could end the war between the species. He dies after being betrayed, but tells Celine to bite Michael, who had already been bit by a Lycan, making him the first hybrid in the series. The scientist working for Lucian said it best: a hybrid is part vampire, part Lycan, but stronger than both. They have all the strengths of both species, but none of the weaknesses. Michael is not affected by silver or sunlight, but he's able to overpower every other supernatural: Lycans, vampires, and even vampire elders. I talked about the third film, Rise of the Lycans, because it's a prequel, so it kinda goes with the first movie. The first film and Rise of the Lycans are my favorite films in the series, and in my opinion the best. The second film, Underworld Evolution, is also pretty good though. We get introduced to Tanis, which was a replacement for Craven since fans apparently didn't like him, Marcus the first vampire, William the first werewolf, and the original immortal Alexander Corvinus. This film fills us in on the history of the Corvinus family and how the first vampire and werewolf were created. Alexander was a warlord in the 5th century, and a plague killed everyone in his village, except him. His body was able to adapt to this plague, and it somehow made him the first immortal. He then had 3 sons, and 2 of them inherited his immortality. One of his sons was bitten by a rabid wolf, and the other was bitten by a bat, creating the first vampire and werewolf. The series then expands on the hybrids. Marcus, the first vampire, becomes what's known as a vampire-dominant hybrid with huge wings and a gargoyle-like appearance. Whether you are a vampire or a lichen first determines what kind of hybrid you become. Also, Selene is given blood by Alexander Corvinus, which makes her much stronger and immune to sunlight. But she's not a hybrid. She's what's called a Corvinus-enhanced vampire. She's not a true hybrid because she has no lichen DNA, only vampire and pure immortal. Evolution was received well by fans and closes up a lot of loose ends from the first movie. I mean, the first movie ends on a cliffhanger of Marcus waking up, so they knew they had a lot more story to tell. At the end of the second movie, all 3 elders are dead, and Selene and Michael are now on the run. Since we already talked about the prequel, we can skip to the 4th movie and the continuation of the story, Underworld Awakening. This is when the story starts to fall apart a bit. I still enjoyed this movie at the time, but you can definitely see the cracks in the armor. It's always surprised me that Awakening was the highest grossing movie of the Underworld series. This movie jumps ahead a bit in time, and humans are now aware of the existence of vampires and lichens, and they're being purged. Vampires are now in danger of going extinct. I think where this movie started to go wrong was getting rid of Michael. He was absolutely integral to the story and a really interesting character. Some people think the actor Scott Speedman just didn't want to keep doing Underworld movies, and I understand that. But if I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. They should have gave him a good death. Anyway, Selene and Michael have been on the run from vampires and lichens, and now humans as well. Awakening starts with Selene and Michael being attacked by humans and hit with a grenade. They didn't die though. Instead, they were taken to a science lab and frozen to be studied. This laboratory is run by lichens. Selene didn't know it at the time, but she was pregnant. Her child was raised in the laboratory and experimented on extensively. By the time Selene wakes up, her daughter is now around 12 years old, so she was frozen for quite a long time. So Michael was a hybrid and so was Marcus. But what makes Selene's daughter so special is that she's the first born hybrid. Selene says her power could be limitless. Wow, they're really setting up Eve to be a beast, even stronger than her father Michael. The lichen scientists have been extracting Eve's DNA and injecting it to make themselves stronger. Since she is descended from the original immortal, her DNA can strengthen someone else's supernatural abilities. Selene and Eve escaped the lab, but Michael is still captive, so they return to fight the enhanced lichens, Jacob and Quint Lane. Jacob looks like the Wolfman, and Quint is a 15 to 20 foot tall uber lichen. Both are considered enhanced lichens, like how Selene is an enhanced vampire. They're not a true hybrid, just a super strong lichen. This was a strange turn to take, with the series having a massive CGI lichen. Up until this point, the werewolves were mostly practical and looked really good. Rise of the Lycans had some of the best looking werewolves of any movie, I think. There's some CGI used in that movie, but mostly when it was tasteful or needed. They developed a special lichen suit in Evolution for William, the first werewolf, because they wanted him to look special. Then, because he looked so good, they dyed the fur black and reused the suit for a lot of lichen shots in Rise of the Lycans. Awakening kind of threw that away and said, screw it, let's go full CGI and have super duper ultra mega uber werewolf. So Awakening ends with Selene defeating Quint and Eve showing off her insane hybrid power, defeating an enhanced lichen, and she's only 12 years old. Seeing how strong Eve is and wondering how strong she can become was the one thing about this movie that had me excited. After defeating the lichens, they try to rescue Michael, but his body is taken by someone and then they fly away in a helicopter. We learn in the next movie he was taken by a lichen named Marius. This made it seem like Michael could still come back, and a lot of people thought he was going to. But the directors must have realized that wasn't going to happen because the next movie establishes that Michael was killed between Awakening and Blood Wars. One of the main characters, and the first hybrid, is killed unceremoniously off screen. This doesn't make sense for so many reasons. First of all, how would Michael be overpowered by 1 or 2 lone lichens? Selene had just woken up from being frozen and killed over a dozen lichens with ease, and she's not even a hybrid. I've always said he should have at least died trying to protect Selene or Eve. Instead, he's easily killed and drained of his blood so Marius can drink it. In an interview with one of the creators of Underworld, Len Wiseman, he said he got rid of Michael because he wanted the story to focus more on the mother-daughter relationship between Selene and Eve. Oh yeah, that makes sense. No more Michael, but we have an even stronger hybrid now. Okay. Except Eve isn't even in Blood Wars, so how can you build the mother-daughter relationship without the daughter? The entire previous movie was spent establishing how powerful and awesome Eve is, the strongest immortal to ever exist, with possibly unlimited potential. And just like that, she's gone. So now we have no Michael or Eve. And even though Michael was removed from Awakening to apparently give more room for Selene and Eve, the character David was introduced as Selene's new love interest, basically replacing Michael. So I don't get it. It's pretty obvious that either Wiseman didn't want him in the movie or Speedman wanted to work on other projects.
I have nothing.
Now, let's take a look at Blood Wars. I'll be honest, it's not all bad. There's some redeeming qualities about this movie. For one, the vampire Thomas, who is also the husband of the vampire elder Amelia. His character has an interesting background, and Charles Dance is a welcome addition to any movie. I thought he was great as the master vampire in Dracula Untold. Also, before this film, we had only ever seen the Old World Coven, which is the house from the first film. In this movie, we are shown the Eastern Coven and the mysterious Northern Coven located in the Carpathian Mountains. There's a coven in Rise of the Lycans as well, which I'm pretty sure is the original Old World Coven, also known as Castle Corvinus. Now the only coven that we know to exist but haven't seen is located in New York. It's known as the New World Coven and was established by Amelia, who also founded the Eastern and Northern Coven. Blood Wars starts with Selene on the run from the vampires and Lycans for what she's done. On top of that, Michael is dead and her daughter has disappeared. The Lycans are looking for Eve because they want to use her hybrid blood to win the war. That's why Eve thought it would be better if she went into hiding, so she ran away and didn't tell her mother where she was going. So even if someone finds Selene, they can't find Eve. This story focuses more on the vampire covens and returns to the more gothic styling of the first 3 films. Selene is invited to the Eastern Coven by the vampires. Thomas convinces Selene to return and train the new generation of death dealers to fight against the Lycans. They know a war is coming. Selene reluctantly agrees, seeking to atone for what she's done in the past, even though it wasn't really her fault. When Selene returns to the coven, she is betrayed by the vampire Samira. During the training, Selene is poisoned with nightshade, which paralyzes her. Then Samira's henchman Varga kills all the death dealer recruits using Selene's weapons and frames her. Samira reveals that her plan was to lure Selene to the coven and use her blood to become a daywalker. Lucky for Selene, Thomas's son David intervenes and rescues her, but in the process, Thomas sacrifices his life to ensure their escape. All the good vampires get killed off in this series. David and Selene flee to the Nordic Coven after Thomas told them the location. Barely anyone has been to the Nordic Coven. Most vampires believe this coven is only a legend. They manage to find it and are safe for now. While here, David learns that he's Amelia's heir to become an elder. The Lycans arrive soon after, and a large battle ensues. Turns out they were being followed by a spy, and that's how they were found. Selene has a fight with Marius, and he wants to know where Eve is, but Selene doesn't know. They try to read her blood memories, but she's telling the truth. Not even Selene knows where Eve is. This makes Marius extremely angry, and Selene is fatally wounded during the fight, but the Nordic Coven has a special ritual. Selene is taken to the undercroft of the Nordic Coven and wrapped in cloth. She is then placed in one of the pools of water. This ritual allows the vampire to connect to what they call the sacred world. By undergoing this process, the vampire returns with new special abilities. The ability to read one's aura and super speed that's so fast it's like teleportation. The ritual is performed by the vampire Lena. I have mixed feelings about these special abilities. They're kinda cool and at least evolve the species in some way, but at the same time, it does take away from the biological aspect of these immortals. Their origin is biological, and before this, they have never had any magical abilities. I don't think it's necessarily a bad change, I just don't know how to feel about it myself. While Selene is healing in the Nordic Coven, Marius is preparing to attack the Eastern Coven. David returns and claims that he's an heir to be an elder. Currently, there is no elders, so this would make him the most powerful vampire. Samira doesn't believe him, but he has blood from his mother so the council can see for themselves. They recognize immediately that the blood is from Amelia, and David is given elder status. The very first thing he does is order Samira to be imprisoned for what she's done. She expects everyone to follow her, but hearing that David is a true elder, they obey him without question and lock her up. She was treating her main henchman Varga like crap, so it also wasn't very hard to convince him to switch sides. The Lycans arrive and the firefight begins. The Lycans shoot holes in the walls to allow sunlight in and burn the vampires. It starts with guns but eventually devolves into a hand-to-hand fight. David is fighting Marius, and this is when Celine returns, with her new super speed. She's able to kill half a dozen Lycans in the blink of an eye. Now David fights Samira and Celine fights Marius. Up until this point, Celine didn't know that Michael was dead, but during the fight, some of Marius's blood goes into Celine's mouth. This allows her to see the memory of Marius killing Michael, which almost makes her give up. Before Marius can kill her though, she remembers her daughter and uses her super speed to teleport behind him and rip out his spine. While David and Samira are fighting, Samira is in the sun for the first time and is distracted. David uses this chance to stab her through the back of the head with a sword. Celine, David, and Lena are then appointed as the new elders. It's also at the very end of the movie that Eve finally returns. I still don't understand why they would make Eve so strong, then make her disappear. I feel like she could have been helpful in defeating Marius, since, you know, she's apparently the strongest immortal ever. In summary, I don't like the lack of Michael and Eve in this movie. It feels like a bit of a step backwards. Also, up until this point, every movie has introduced a new variant of the species. The first movie had the hybrid, the second movie had the vampire-dominant hybrid, the pure immortal, and the original werewolf. Rise of the Lycans didn't have any hybrids, but that was a prequel. Then Awakening had Eve, the first ever born hybrid. Eyes like a vampire, but blue skin like her father. Awakening also had two new variants of the enhanced Lycan, Quint's Uber-Lycan form and Jacob Lane's Wolfman. Then we get to Blood Wars, and I guess Marius is a new variant, but not really. He's pretty much a less cool version of Jacob Lane, with like a weird human head. My problem with Marius is we don't know anything about him. Where he comes from, why he's waging this war, why he wants to become stronger, nothing. One interesting part about him that could have led to some interesting conflict is that he was having a relationship with a vampire. Things I do like about Blood Wars is the introduction of the Eastern Coven, the look of the Eastern Coven, same with the Northern Coven. I like Thomas's role in the movie and the twist that David is Amelia's son. I think that story could have been told and fleshed out a little better, but I like the idea. Like I said before, I have mixed feelings about the ritual that gives superpowers, but I don't hate it. It's just that something that made this series unique was that the virus was biological in nature, not supernatural. That's why they were never affected by crosses and have no magical abilities like flight, compulsion, or anything else. Just super strong, fast, and don't age. And I really liked that idea. It was one of the things that originally drew me to this series. Maybe the thing that I like the most about Blood Wars is that Celine becomes an elder. That feels like a natural progression of the story and has come full circle from her killing the old elders, going from most wanted to highest honor. This is one of my favorite series of all time, but I've always felt like the first three movies are one story being continued, then Awakening and Blood Wars are tacked on. I would rather have them than not, but there is a separation in my mind. Awakening almost feels like a soft reboot. We're now in a less gothic setting, interacting with humans, no more elders and such, and vampires are going extinct. They're not the strong, powerful beings they used to be. Now they're cowering in the shadows. In Blood Wars, you hear nothing about vampires being hunted, so I guess that's just over. After Awakening, Blood Wars almost feels like another soft reboot, more of a return to form, taking place in a more gothic vampire setting, the Eastern and Northern Coven. Almost no humans to speak of, and the story now involves David and his connection to the vampire elder Amelia. So at least we're back to the elders, the stuff people actually found interesting. Blood Wars got really bad reviews. I think a lot of people were disappointed with Blood Wars at the time because they were anticipating Michael's return. So it's not that it was horrible, it just wasn't what people were expecting. Also, they removed Eve, which was going to be such a cool character, and then we never really got to see her in her full power. I like the actor that plays Marius, but they really dropped the ball with the writing on the character. Victor was the best antagonist by far. That's why Underworld 1 and Rise of the Lycans is so strong. He had a complex history with inner conflict about his daughter that he sentenced to death, which is why he turned Celine because she looked like his daughter. Then he went on to raise Celine basically as his daughter. This showed that although he was a ruthless leader of the Old World Coven, he had human aspects to him, which made him seem like a real person. Marcus was also a pretty good antagonist with a complex backstory of turning Victor and then Victor stabbing him in the back and imprisoning his brother, giving him many reasons to want to take over and kill everyone. I think they could have had another great movie if they combined the ideas from Awakening and Blood Wars. Have Eve and Selene fighting side by side, but have them find the Eastern Coven, Northern Coven, defeat the Lycans, and become elders. I could totally picture the scene with Selene bringing Eve to the Coven in Awakening, taking place in the Northern Coven instead. I really do believe if you took all the good ideas of the two films, you could make something pretty cool. My final verdict would be that I still think Blood Wars is the worst of the Underworld films. No Michael, no Eve, not much character development, and Marius is boring. If this was the first movie in this series, it would not have gotten the 4 sequels it did. That being said, if you are a fan of all the Underworld films like me, then it's worth a watch. If I had to rate it, I would give it a 6 out of 10, and even that might be biased because I'm a huge fan of the series. I know many people out there would give it a 1 out of 10, but I feel like that's not really fair. Let me know what you guys think of Blood Wars. Do all of you think it's as bad as the reviews say, or is there some redeeming qualities about the movie? Personally, I think there is. I made this video because I rewatched the series and wanted an excuse to talk about it again, so I hope you enjoyed. If there's any other movies, TV shows, or video games you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments down below. If you were entertained, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. It helps out a lot and I really appreciate it. As always, an extra shout out to my members for showing support on the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.